welcome to the podcast, part two.
Part two. It's an awesome honor to be back here, man. I've been tracking and watching, and it's exciting to see the evolution of the podcast, and then to be back in season 3 is an honor. So I really appreciate that. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, man. Well, it should be simple. We've known each other for years. We've obviously, as you mentioned, we're just looking at the first podcast, episode 8, understanding AI privacy and addressing data overload challenges. And there's some things in there that I still say today that you said then, about things like trusting AI and like the perspective around, helping customers get across the chasm from AI being this scary thing into something that's useful. And so, yeah, I know that was a great discussion, and I know this is going to be a better one because even since episode 8, a lot has changed for both of us as far as in our careers and certainly in our perspectives by it being, and I definitely would include you in this, in the AI community, not just in the security community. And one of the things that we talked about, you actually wrote a recent article on, and I'm sure some of that will come out in today's discussion, is around this idea of VisionOps. And so the title is What is VisionOps? And so the idea is that we're going to go through just, a lot of Q&A and discussion to figuring out what that is and unpacking the specifics of that. And certainly I'm really excited because this is new information to me too. So I'm looking forward to hearing your perspective as we unfold this a little bit more. So yeah, so let's start off, right? So
Yeah.
Jody, tell us, what is VisionOps and how does it differ from traditional security operations?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I have to say that it's not my idea. It's actually something that has kind of naturally, organically come together amongst a lot of quote unquote thought leaders in the space. Really, I would attribute it to Philip Jang or James Conner. Philip from Brainiac's group and has been a security leader for a lot of really big global organizations. And he put out an article not too long ago, amongst other articles that he has been sort of voicing over the last couple of years, where he specifically called it VisionOps. And I think that when I read that article, it triggered for me because in this industry, as you're well aware of, we talk a lot about a bunch of different things. And a lot of times we use different terminology. We, kind of define categories very loosely. And anytime that you have this new, really impactful emerging technology or redefining a category of business, one of the most important things to do early on, I believe, is to give it a name and define the terms of what it is. And so I think that Philip's done a really good job of kind of getting that out there to the market. And then for me, being involved in the computer vision products, I just immediately felt that I needed to reinforce that. So what is VisionOps? Right now, it's an idea. It's a way of life for a security practitioner. It really is about taking sort of a more advanced look on the traditional operational model of physical security so that it is foundationally built with computer vision intelligence as the main tenet of how this technology is going to produce value for the customer. It's kind of what we've already been talking about in the industry with analytics and AI powered forensics and threat detection and all those kinds of things. We're just putting a solid name on it because the reality is it's not just a video management system anymore. It's not just an access control system anymore or an intrusion alarm or building automation. All of these systems are converging through an AI platform, and it's going to expand beyond security. It's going to expand to full operational impact for organizations. And so VisionOps is just the beginning of that. And I think that if you really want to look at how to take, starting with security, that's the easiest because there's already tons of cameras associated in the security space. And the customer already has a lot of cameras. And so the idea is that, okay, now we're going to power those cameras to be a foundation for a lot more than just traditional security. When you want to start thinking about things like automating workflows, certainly with the buzz around agentic AI, that's only going to be really capable through a vision model that is going to enable the agentic AI to really, really be what we all kind of have this vision of it being in the future.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's got to be some input to drive the agent. So for the audience, an agent is literally, if you haven't heard yet, an agent is just AI that goes and does stuff for you, which is the simplest definition from Sam Altman, the guy co-founded OpenAI. It has attributes like short-term, long-term memory, and then it also has reasoning capability, so it uses more advanced AI models basically to think through things. And then the last is to take action. And to your point, what better input than camera vision?
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people in the industry would definitely get on board with the idea that cameras have been underutilized, or they not by, I don't think by intention, but just by maybe lack of a number of things, right? I don't think anyone intentionally is like, I want to get the least amount of value out of my security system as possible. And so I could see your point, right? Is that camera can do so much. We could do so much with our own vision capability as an input. As my eyes see something, what data can I take in? What foundational data can I take in that can enhance any agent flows, where it allows this AI to go do stuff, as opposed to just feeding me data analytics, or feeding me something that I have to then synthesize or even do something with, right? And so I
Part of the
think that's right.
challenge with the agentic AI is you've got these agents today, and this is, as you're experiencing this firsthand. You're leading one of the leading chargers in this field right now. It's extremely narrow in what the agents can actually do for you. You can have a disparate sort of field of different AI agents that accomplish different tasks, but we're not at the point yet where somebody's just going to turn over the keys of their physical security system to an
Absolutely.
autonomous AI. We all want, or we all envision a world where that is a possibility. The only way that we're going to get there is to build the agent that can operate 100% autonomously. And that is going to require that really important input of vision. And because we already have cameras everywhere, they're ubiquitous, it's easy for us to get more cameras everywhere. We can literally, what I like to say is, teach businesses what the world looks like through those cameras. And then as we add more and more capability with what the agentic AIs can do, that becomes the foundational platform called VisionOps, which we will then build out things like beyond security. Like, I want employee health and safety to be incorporated. I want logistics to be incorporated into this, business or visitor management, like all these things that organizations have to think about with their physical infrastructure and their facilities. Vision plays a key role in all of those. And so designing a platform that is built foundationally from a vision first tenet means that when we get to that point that we want to employ those agents to do all of this truly autonomous magic, they'll have the right inputs and the right tools in place to be able to do it successfully.
I like, let's get back to some of the foundations, right? So this next question is, in what ways is computer vision foundational to the development of the effectiveness of vision ops? Obviously, we've made some, there's already been some assertions there, but would love to dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that so you can have a camera, and you can have a camera watching a door, and that camera is going to be effective for understanding either in real time who's coming and going through the door or what's happening at that door, or it's going to timestamp the video for you, and you're going to have the ability to go back and review what happened. So you're still you're saddled with a human that has to watch that camera, which we all would agree that at scale that's almost impossible, especially for extended periods of time and hundreds of cameras. Or you're going to be reactionary in the point of only using the camera to go back and investigate what happened instead of preventing something from happening. So computer vision gives you the ability to use that camera at scale without having to worry about the human and the human's ability to understand what's happening in real time all the time, because humans get tired and humans get distracted, and there's a lot going on in security operations centers, et cetera. And so the foundational piece of the vision ops is the computer vision ability to detect and classify objects so that we understand what's happening as things are moving through that door. The next stage of that is when you incorporate the intelligence that's capable of understanding behavior and context. All of that requires a very strong computer vision foundation, because you're not going to understand context and behavior if you don't understand the object that you're looking at. So it's kind of like, would you hire a security guard, put them in front of a door, and tell them to only watch people coming through the door, but ignore the fact if somebody walks up to the door and stands there with a crowbar in their hand? or ignore the fact if somebody walks through the door and falls down and injures himself, because that security guard is only there to watch the door. That's kind of what we're doing with cameras today. Once we incorporate computer vision intelligence, now that security guard can say, wait a minute, this guy standing here with the crowbar is acting a little sus. I'm going to go check this out. Or, oh, wow, this person just fell down and hurt themselves. I need to get emergency services, to respond and help them. It's like a fork in the road. You can either do that with a lot of humans and a lot of eyeballs, and we've already tried that. And over time, it gets really expensive. It's not very effective. It doesn't scale. Or you can do it with computer vision technology, which is almost infinitely scalable, has the ability to detect things that humans even can't detect. And we are starting to evolve that product now to a point where we can actually contextualize and understand behaviors, which then leads towards the ability to do things like predictive analysis, right? Like understanding that this thing is about to turn into a bad situation. All of that is going to hinge on really accurate, really fast anomaly detection, event correlation, predictive analytics, and that's all foundationally part of what computer vision brings to the table.
Yeah, I like the way you set this up. By the way, side note, I don't know what Gen Z you sold sus from, but that was awesome.
I got kids.
Okay, totally sus that. Yeah. So let me try to layer this out and help me if I'm going in the wrong direction. Right? It seems computer vision is a baseline thing that has to happen in order to get VisionOps, where I basically got now a transformed security operations team that's thinking about security differently, thinking about how they can leverage computer vision to do more than just security. Obviously, predicting bad things happening, maybe, or whatever, a weird behavior. But like you mentioned, it could be other operational improvements within the business, which I love the idea. I've always been a big fan of that because I hate the limiting perspective around security as a cost center. Security, we're just here to mitigate risk. Like, I don't know. That might seem admirable, but when you ain't getting no money to grow your program, it doesn't get so sexy over a period of time. Actually, it's frustrating. I can only imagine from their perspective. But then the next level, oh, sorry, I was going to say then maybe once we're at the VisionOps area, then maybe then we start to get agentic. So do you see it as those kind of three layers, computer vision, VisionOps to agentic, or would you add anything as far as a customer progressing into more of an autonomous future? I guess is my point.
No, I think you laid it out really, really nicely. That's exactly what I'm kind of envisioning myself, and what I think a lot of people are envisioning that are thinking about VisionOps. If you look at the traditional AI hype cycle, or the technology hype cycle, where you see kind of the big rise in expectations and then the dips when people start to realize that this thing isn't quite as great, and then you get what they call the plateau of productivity, and that's where that particular technology has started to really show a return on investment. It is productive. It is now a viable, realistic technology that can be applied in real world use cases, right? Computer vision on the AI scale, computer vision is really the only subset of AI in the physical security space, primarily is where I'm talking. This could be wrong in other spaces, but computer vision is really the only subset of AI that is actually on that plateau of productivity and has been there for some time now. It's one of the oldest subsets of AI, and it has developed over, at this point, 70 plus years to get to this point where we're actually starting to utilize it in multi-domain applications. So the kind of camera that you would use to study a defect on a product moving across a production line is different than the kind of camera that you would use to watch your doors and your lobbies in your building for surveillance reasons. And then traditionally, the kind of technology or application that you would use was quite a bit different for the assembly line. And the kind of technology that you would use today to do something like threat detection and anomalous behavior detection is quite a bit different. Now that we've established computer vision is on that plateau of productivity, it is a real viable product. The next step is now to say, okay, why do we have to have different technology, different software, and a different camera to study that defect on the assembly line versus the camera we're using in the lobby? And VisionOps is going to give us the ability, as we build a platform that is AI first, computer vision foundation, it's going to give us the ability to use the same products, the same cameras to a certain degree, which then expands the use case. For you and I and people that are on the manufacturing side selling a product to an end user, The sales cycle, the sales motion now expands well beyond just the security team leadership for that organization. The stakeholders get much bigger, which means there's a lot more opportunity, like you said, to bring in avenues where it's not just a cost center. It's not like thinking about adding more cameras just so that we can potentially catch a slip and fall incident. Now, if you use this VisionOps platform, we can save you money by detecting things like the defect on the board.
Customers have like so many different kinds of systems, and I wonder like how they get to the point of streamlining this where they can get value, that's more than just a cost center. So I mean, just quick maybe, and then we'll get right back to some of the questions, but is there any like removal, is there a way to remove those barriers to entry when they have like a variety of systems in order to first accomplish a foundation of computer vision? Any thoughts around that?
Today in physical security, that's exactly one of the biggest value drivers that we can bring to an organization, especially a large organization that has maybe gone through multiple years of mergers and acquisitions and multiple sites or locations. And a lot of times, you can have a different access control system over here and a different access control system over here and a different one over there. And the same thing with the video. And you need a platform that can kind of pull all those disparate systems together, input the data, ingest the data and be able to make some sort of actionable value out of it. And that's where vision platforms can really shine, because they can take access control information from various systems. They can take the video feeds from various systems. We can incorporate intrusion, building automation, visitor management, put it all behind the old single pane of glass. I kind of hate saying that. I'm sorry you had to hear that. I know you don't probably like it either, but you put it all behind the old single pane of glass, and now the customer doesn't have to be so concerned about upgrading and ripping and replacing traditional equipment so that they can get to this new VisionOps foundation. So if you have a product that is really solid in computer vision, and then through an API ecosystem, ideally, or some other things that are coming along, you can pull all that into one central pane of glass. Now you've really moved the needle for efficiency for that organization.
Right. Yeah, and I do wonder, I'll say this, and then we're going to go into the next question, which is a different topic. But I think for any end users that are trying to get to some foundation of computer vision, if you're stuck, with the system you're using today, I can only imagine that, if the manufacturer you're working with isn't doing something about it, then you can start to slow roll out to something else. But some platform, I think, like to your point, Jody, it needs to align with this, because this is not the future. This is right now. And I'd hate if I was a customer and I had thousands of cameras and I was in video walls and trying to traditionally go through this. Like, the times have changed. So let's get really back to the agent stuff, and then we'll come back to computer vision. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is, how do agentic AIs enhance security measures when integrated with computer vision technologies?
Yeah, that's a really great topic. I think that with ISC West coming up, this exact question and conversation is going to be having a lot across the security industry. Ultimately, like we established earlier, agentic AI is very narrow AI at this point. There's an agent for this and an agent for that and an agent for this other thing. For us to really provide value to the security operations, we have to be able to utilize agents that can actually either communicate with each other or are multi-modality enough that they can go and do a whole lot of different things. And so number one for me, when I think about the first steps of what we're going to see and what we're already seeing from some vendors out there, is an operator, right? A security operator that can be an agentic AI. That requires the vision to be able to see what's happening in the video stream, because video is a very, very important foundational piece of security and surveillance. So the rapid human-like interpretation of video data is extremely important. And you're going to have an agent that can do that. You're going to have an agent that can do autonomous investigations, that can see events unfolding and begin the investigation for the human investigator to pick up on at a later point. I kind of envision a world where I sit down on Monday, my agentic AI says, "Hello, Jody, here are 3 incidents that occurred at the facility this past weekend that you should probably review," right? And then it's already established the start and stop point of the incident. It's already maybe given me some notes or some context of what's going on in the incident. And then I'm going to be the more strategic decision maker of how we manage that incident from that point forward. So you've got an AI that can do the video surveillance piece and detect anomalies and detect behaviors. You've got an AI that can do the autonomous investigation and can begin the initial assessment of events. And then you've got another AI that can do kind of like contextualization and summaries with text and voice and provide you with reports and all that kind of stuff. I think that the real future for specifically for the physical security world, and when I say future, I mean like what's happening very quickly. Like this is going to be this year. I work for an AI company, but it's not just going to be my company that I work for. There's going to be a lot of companies that are doing this, and the market is driving that. But you're going to have a combination of all three of those, or one single agentic AI that has the capacity to do all three of those things. And it's basically going to be riding shotgun with your human operator, which means that organizations are going to be able to shift the focus of how they strategize around labor towards more of a technology cost. And it's going to free up, not like getting rid of humans, but it's going to free up the humans that they have to do more strategic, more impactful, more proactive type security operations or behavior versus staring at reports, staring at cameras, clicking through a scrub bar on a history browser or something like that.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate the vision for obvious reasons too, because I own a automation agency. And
Yeah.
so
So
spot on.
let me ask you that in that vein, are you seeing the same sort of like, I mean, I would imagine when I found out about what you were doing with Highland and having known you and had conversations, I sort of immediately thought, this dude's going to have like a app store of agents in the security space. I mean, is that kind of what you envision this thing becoming?
I do actually. Well, and I think too, going back to the buildup is, with this, an agent is very like you mentioned, it's very task oriented, right? So I think for the audience perspective, a lot of times when people think about AI, it's like this omniscient thing that I press a button, it does everything for me. We'll get there one day, right? But right now we're in the phase of you can still hear me okay, right? Okay, good. We're in the phase of building this digital workforce, right? So in this case, it's just within a security product, it's doing one thing really well because it also has to do that one thing many, many, many times, right? It's a repetitive task,
And
and
reliably.
and reliably, absolutely, with reduction of hallucinations, all that other stuff, or error rates. So then what happens is phase two is a multi-agent framework, which you described, where now you have, you get these single ones that are on their own doing the thing, but a multi-agent framework can create orchestration between themselves. And that means that maybe one might call on the other, or the human could call on both. So instead of the first one to say, I call on operator, clear my alarms or whatever, I might call an operator and this other one to work together to solve a problem. So being able to identify as a human, I'd have to be able to identify who are the best ones to go solve the thing that I need. But phase three is, in my perspective, potentially the last phase, or could be argued as the last phase of this agent building era that we're in, that some could argue go as far as 10 years. Some might go as low as 3, but I think it's going to be a while. I think a lot of companies, they're really building the digital workforce now. Is the last phase would be the orchestrator, the agent manager. And so the idea is that, yeah, you would have your ChatGPT window through natural language. Copilot, Microsoft says Copilot will be the UI for AI. So there'll be a conversational window. And that one orchestrator agent will then go and do whatever it is that you're trying to do. So it will call on those agents. The reason why that's going to happen from a common sense perspective, because once you get like hundreds of agents, or for a business, thousands of agents swarming your business, you're not going to remember who to call on. And
Right.
your own decision will not be optimized, but the AI will. And so there will be some main orchestration agent that will do that work. But that's tremendously complex because as you bring these things in, they have to be able to work through all the particulars, right? All the specifics. It's not that it's not possible. I'm working on something right now that's going to do that. And so I think the point is that I believe in what you're saying because I'm doing it in practice and I'm seeing that as the evolution within this space, within the agent, the digital AI era that we're in right now. The next up is physical AI. Shout out to NVIDIA having their conference this week. So yeah, I'm right there with you, man.
You said it's really complex, and that's absolutely it. But it's also specifically with physical security, it's very sensitive. And
Absolutely.
just we've seen this throughout, at least for my 20 plus career in the industry. The adoption of technology is not necessarily because it's too expensive to adopt or it's too complicated. The market is oftentimes just hesitant to adopt because it is security, right? And we know that we can just put a lock on a door or build a wall and have security. Whereas when you start trying to get people to adopt, especially things that are autonomous, that are making security decisions, that's a very, very sensitive subject for a lot of people and a lot of organizations. So we have to get past that, which is why podcasts like this are so important, why getting out there and kind of demystifying AI, especially, once ChatGPT hit the market and everybody is now suddenly experiencing or playing around with AI, their whole concept and perception of it changed to generative AI is what is really the thing, right? Where, like I said, computer vision, it's a form of AI and it's been around for since the 50s and 60s, really. So we have to kind of educate the market and make sure that they understand that we're not always talking about generative AI. That is part of the whole picture and certainly a very important part of the agentic AI. But there's all these other things that we can do today to bring value that are AI powered and encourage the market to at least dip their toes in a little bit and try it. And it starts with analytics. 10 years ago, if you started trying to sell analytics, a lot of organizations would dip their toes in and then they'd say, whoa, it's way too noisy. It doesn't actually provide any value. We're not doing it. And analytics were really slow to be adopted. Now we've gotten to a point where most organizations, I think, are saying, at least in the conversations I'm having, they're saying we're looking for something that can detect behavior, that can detect these kinds of things, because the humans just they're not built to do that on a regular basis. Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good, man. And actually, I think I'd love to. I mean, obviously, a huge fan of agents, but I'd love to continue on the soapbox. I think the last thing I'll say about this, and then we can close and come back to VisionOps. This is relative to VisionOps for anyone
Absolutely.
listening, right? When we talked about earlier in the conversation, right, computer vision, VisionOps to agents, is that this is absolutely relevant to the discussion. And one of the things, Jody, that I've done as an AI agency owner is when we go through these conversations with customers, I tell them, like, hey, I go on a philosophy that basically is pretty simple. This is just because we can doesn't mean we should, meaning that agents aren't needed for everything. Now, people think I need to apply AI to do all things, but there's a lot of things that AI is way overkill for, right? That simple Boolean logic or business BPA software, business process automation software, just connecting an API call to do something super narrow is totally fine for, right? And so when we go through an exercise with a customer, we present our quadrant, which is, I haven't seen one like this. I made it up, but I made it up based on what big tech has been pushing, which the number one thing that an agent solves is repetitive tasks. Repetitive tasks. That's it. And if it's not repetitive, it's probably overkill. And so when we look at the quadrant of, repetitive to high impact, and when we look at the top part where it has all the high repetitive things, when it's high repetitive and low impact, there's potential for autonomous agents, which is like the holy grail right now, the thing that completely can work a workflow for you. You know, an example of that would be like I have a calendar agent I just put online recently in a demo. That's pretty low impact, right? Like, I mean, it solves a problem for me, but if it slightly gets it wrong in the calendar, like it's not going to kill anyone, right? It's not going to lose me a bunch of money. Now, if I had that same calendar agent and I had like 500 people that needed to use it, if this thing went sideways, that could be more of a high impact, but still not to the degree that physical security fits in.
Mm-hmm.
So once we get into the high repetitive, which are like alarms, but holy crap, like one real situation could be super high impact. What I wrote in a recent LinkedIn post was that I think the human in the loop in the physical security industry for the foreseeable future will be here for a while. So basically, these things will present the operators, the people, with options to choose from for things that are like highly repetitive that no one's looking through the information for, and that person has to then take action on those things from human in the loop perspective. And so, which I love about that, because now we get back to critical thinking and our brains don't turn into mush by looking at cameras all day.
Yeah.
Like I from a salesperson perspective, I like making cold calls because it builds grit and appreciation for the sell. But at the same time, if you do that plus you do enterprise sales, which I did that at Brevo at one point in time in my career, while I was cold calling, plus I had to take like complicated sales cycles. You go from your brain turns into mush to a complicated sell conversation problem solving thing, right? And those are really hard to balance,
Yeah.
right? You go from like I've lost brain cells, to making 50 calls in a day, and I'm saying the same voicemail, but I haven't gotten anyone. To I have to have an in-depth discussion to understand my customers' problems more than they do, and that's really hard, right? So I think we remove this,
Clear
right?
up the RAM.
Clear up the RAM, and we focus on the good stuff. So anyway, so that's a soapbox agent pause. Maybe we'll come back probably, but for the sake of the topic, let's get into more examples, right, of
Okay.
this stuff, right? So can you provide examples of how computer vision currently is being utilized in access control and
Yeah.
alarm systems?
Yeah. This is actually this. It goes really well with what you were just talking about with
Yes.
the kinds of tasks that AI can be really efficient at. Access control by design is extremely noisy, and we want it that way. We put a door sensor on a door because we want to know when that door's forced open, held open, all those kinds of things. And access control and intrusion alarms do a really good job of alarming us of activity. At scale, that becomes incredibly noisy for a security operator. It is literally the 50 phone calls that you have to make, cold calling all day long before you switch to the more important, more cognitive task. Because if you've been in a large enterprise sized security operations center, there's just chaos. There's bells and whistles going off, there's cameras popping up. A lot of times you'll rarely meet a security leader that tells you he's got enough bodies, right, to manage all that noise. And so it becomes very, very impactful on efficiency for the organization. It's costly in terms of labor. And there is a significant amount of just overall dissatisfaction for the job from the security operator's perspective. And so one of the things that computer vision and VisionOps will do is understand the context of those signals, right? So access control does a really good job of telling you that something's happening at a door, but it does nothing to tell you why that thing is occurring at that door. And the example that I will often go to is a door propped open versus a door held open. For me, as a human being and as a security operator, when an alert comes in for a door held open, I have to look at that alert. I have to associate it to a camera feed. I have to look at the feed and I have to say, okay, is the door propped open, which is a security vulnerability, or is it poor Sally trying to leave and Bob caught her as she was getting out the door and he's wanting to talk about work and she just wants to go to lunch and she's standing there holding the door open saying, yeah, Bob, yep, let's talk, yeah, trying to get out the door. Okay, so I say that's the case. Now I make a note, I clear the alarm, and I go back to my business until the next alarm comes up. That's the context that computer vision can do for organizations. It can look, it can say, that door held open alarm is going off because somebody's propped a chair to hold that door open while they run out innocently to go grab their DoorDash delivery. They've now opened up a threat vector for my perimeter, right? Or it can look at it and say, oh no, that's two employees that are talking and it's not a threat. If a person attempts to get through that door, we'll alert, but otherwise there's nothing to be concerned with here. And so we've literally seen, with the company that I work for, with our customers that use computer vision to add context to their access control and to their intrusion alarms, we see a 90 plus, sometimes even 95 plus reduction in the amount of noise, signal noise that they're seeing in their security operations. And that's not sales chatter. That's real results. Like I can get out a Barn app and show you the numbers that prove that this is no longer a cost center, because we can, in some organizations it turns into millions of dollars. You'd be shocked probably, but we can provide the signal noise ratio so that the signal is valuable and the noise is quieted. And we have a lot of people that, not just we, but organizations that have looked into this kind of technology inevitably will tell you that they didn't even realize how bad of a situation it was until the noise went away, which is oftentimes, it's like if you've got the ringing in your ear, you get used to it and your brain sort of shuts it down. And then all of a sudden you walk into a quiet room and bing, that ring comes back. That's the same kind of experience that a lot of people are having when they start to contextualize and use alarm management with computer vision, because you've already got the camera there at the door, right? So let's power that camera to do more than just record who's walking through the door. Let's use that camera to understand the context of what's happening at that door. And then you can expand it from there. Like false alarms with motion detectors for an intrusion system, that can basically go away. And in fact, some people are getting rid of the motion sensors and they're just using the cameras, because the cameras are now so good at detecting any sort of real motion by a person or a cat or whatever it is you're concerned with. So I think that that's one of the easiest low-hanging fruits for organizations to consider is, I've got a large access control system, I've got video surveillance cameras. How can I pair those better together? Not in the sense of when an alarm goes off, I want to see the camera. We're already past that. When the alarm goes off, I want my AI to see what's happening and then tell me if it's something that needs my attention.
Yeah, I love it. It's well explained, super concise. Out of curiosity, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but it seems like there's so many things that can happen within the camera's view. And I wonder, does a company, like a manufacturer, program these things? Or they create the computer vision around that for every single thing that they do? Or are they using generative AI in order to accelerate that? Now, I know generative AI is being used to enhance and increase the rate of programming, right? But I don't know. I really don't know the context to from a computer vision standpoint, because I've looked at some companies, and I'm sure I know you guys are actually one of them. Like it seems like you could search anything and it'll just find it, but that wasn't. It's like I don't know that the companies have thought about every single use case and a program every single one. So I wonder, like, how do these things detect something? It seems like it can find anything in many cases. Are they programmed like really individually and there's that much thought, or is there something else happening behind the scenes that allow these the AI, the computer vision, to be much more useful in an unpredictable environment? And that's I know that was a little off topic, but I was just curious on your perspective.
It's an awesome topic. I love this because it really is. It's one of the things that I talk a lot about, and I get I write articles and other things about it.
Good.
So I believe that. So let me back up a little bit and answer your question. Most of the time, yes, it is something that has been programmed by the manufacturer that is based off of a simple detection and classification heuristic. Like if you detect this thing and it's doing this, then trigger an alert. Send me a text message or something like that, right? And that is very, very, very controlled, defined rules that are built into what one company may call a threat signature, another company might call a threat detection, another company could call it an analytic, but it's basically utilizing, it's mostly utilizing some of your more traditional like YOLO models that do really good object and detection based off of neural networks for machine learning. And they understand every possible iteration of a cat versus a dog. And they've been trained on all that to a point where they can identify a cat. And if you want an alert that says, don't alert me if there's a dog here, but alert me if there's a cat here, they can do that really well, right? Now, the best organizations, the best products that are coming to market today, and I think will become the de facto way it is done in the very near future, is a combination of object detection and classification, and then contextualization through a large vision model like the generative AI application. Some organizations are trying to skip the object detection and classification because they feel like it's too hard to maintain and keep updated, and you're constantly having to scale hardware to do that. So let's just feed video to an LVM and allow it to do threat detection. That gets a little dicey in my opinion, because as you and I both well know, and most people that have played around with products like ChatGPT, it's not always accurate. It can hallucinate. It can think it sees something and it's not really there, or it can think something is way, more of a threat than it actually is. And then you get more signal noise than signal value. So the best companies are taking an approach of running through essentially a filter. You utilize a multi-stage AI approach that says we're going to have a couple of different types of models. I think that for most, it's some form of object detection and classification model. There's probably some form of generative adversarial model that will kind of understand incomplete information. you put those two together and you get a really nice filter that can then send events to the large vision model to understand context and to start looking for anomalous things. Now, what I see that evolving into is, for me, if I were a manufacturer actually having to build this, I'm fortunate enough that I just sell it and I'm not smart enough to build it. But if I were building it, that would allow me to build custom threat models much faster than if I were to just try to guess what the customer needs next, right? I can go to a customer now, and this is a very common conversation. Customers like, well, can you do this? And then we're like, well, computer vision could do that. We don't have a detection for that thing, but yeah, computer vision can do it. Whereas now, with the application of these larger vision models, it gives us the ability to say, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, if you can detect it as a human and make some sort of logical assumption to the context of what's happening, the AI can do that as well. Now, we will still build the filter first. We will have it, it's not just going to ingest everything. It's going to ingest what we tell it, and then that will lead to the ability to let the AI determine what needs to be escalated. So maybe a person loitering doesn't need to be escalated to the security operator because this is a busy street. People are loitering there all the time. But if that person's loitering and then all of a sudden, they pull out a can of lighter fluid and a match, that loiter event is about to turn into something a lot more dangerous. And so we can detect the loiter, and then we can send it to the LVM. The LVM says, well, actually, that's a loiter, but there's dangerous material, hazardous materials involved. I'm going to escalate this automatically to a medium severity level alert, which now goes through some sort of workflow so that my security operators are aware of it. And that's sort of where we're going to see it this year. I think there's probably, I would say at ISC West, you're probably going to see 3 or 4 manufacturers that are doing some form of that architecture.
Yeah. I'm really glad you went down that route because it's something I had been thinking about for a while. Because I was like, hey, I mean, these models are detecting all kinds of things and things that we haven't accounted for in the security industry for a really long time. And there's a lot more going on in a scene than a person in a car, you know? And so, I won't name names, but I've had some folks on the podcast, I think that felt different. And in my mind, it's like, well, I mean, you're already seeing it. I mean, Google had demoed their product, and if you've seen the video of them using a phone, and this thing can detect like random stuff, cups. It'll tell you what's on the table, and even Helix, which Helix 2, the new robot from Figure, I think theirs was called the language vision model, so I could talk to it. It would transcribe the language, the intent, everything a language model should do, but then use these vision models in order to figure out what's around it for things that it probably has not been programmed for. It's making the assumption, and this is on. I think they're doing this on the edge at like 7 billion parameters is the biggest model that's on the device. And there's a second model. I think it's like in the maybe 300 millions or something range, but enough to put it like on the device, which is, to me, if we could put general robotics in the home to like clean your house, we can crush cameras like
Yeah,
all day. And that's all a camera is like the head of the robot, just to physically
exactly. It's
make the
just
world, right?
the eyeball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way you're describing was the way I understood that Helix was doing it, which makes sense because it's like, what are the things that this thing needs to know, like for sure, and then where can we give it the opportunity to create that's maybe less of a problem, right, in the real world. And so yeah, I can really appreciate that perspective, and I'm glad that you guys and you're involved in that too, because I see so much promise in that. I mean, we had in our days at Eagle Eye, and I think you're involved in this project with me, but we had a customer that was one of the biggest blood donation companies in the country, right?
Yep.
Non for profits, and they're like, well, we want to detect plasma bags, and at the time, we were building AI computer vision to detect exactly that object, but that object is really hard to build for because it's like a rectangle. It's got some fluid inside. Maybe it has like a label on it, but the object itself seems so generic because it's like a rectangle that it's like impossible to think that traditional means would do that. But now with generative AI, it's like now everything seems like it's on the table to a degree where it's looking for not just objects, but maybe colors, and it's looking for behaviors around it to say, like, because of the behaviors around this blood bag, plus the identifiers that we believe would make it a blood bag would therefore make it a blood bag or something, you know? And it just feels like it's almost like we're at the stage, or we're not at the stage, but we're moving in a direction where if you can think it, you could do it. And to me, in the security world, and especially operational efficiencies, that's really exciting. You know, it allows us to be able to do things that we've only dreamed about. And it seems like computer vision is leading the way with that. So while we've talked about a lot of positive things and potential benefits for it, I love to talk about some of the challenges around automating security processes through camera vision AIs. So, what are just some of the challenges you've seen in order to automate those processes using computer vision?
That's a good one. Well, so let's start with just the really common challenge or complaint that people have had for years around the use of this kind of technology is the error rate and the noise, right? So we have to make sure that we're not adding more noise to the security operation, because the whole point of this is to make things more efficient, make things less chaotic. But the technology is not perfect, and it does rely, especially from computer vision standpoint, does rely on certain placements of the camera, certain types of cameras to be used, resolutions, parameters like shutter speed and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't take very much to throw off the capacity for the AI to operate at optimal detection rates. And so one of the big challenges that I think the industry is seeing right now is we went around and we kind of told people to cover as much area as possible with as little amount of cameras. So you get a camera with a big, giant, wide focal length and put it up really high and you can cover your parking lot. And the answer was, oh, well, we'll just bump the resolution up so that we can understand detail. And the market said, okay. And they went and did that, And now when you go in and you say, okay, we want to start using this new AI product, this computer vision product, there's could be at times 50% of the cameras just aren't well placed to do things like understand the context of the door. If you've got a camera that is barely able to see the whole door, then it's going to be very difficult for the AI to understand if the door is opened or closed, or to understand where people are in relation to that door. So just physically, that's been one of the main challenges, is making sure we've got cameras that are in the right place, cameras that are providing adequate coverage with the kind of, on a little more technical term, but like things like the correct pixel density for that area is not always going to be as good as it should be. And the whole way that computer vision starts is through its ability to process the video. One of the things that a lot of what we do hinges on is very accurate edge detection of the object, right? To be able to extract that object from the image in order to understand what it is. And if we can't do accurate edge detection because the pixels there's not enough pixel density, or there's too much digital noise or something like that, then that can be challenging. Now, that's the kind of more of the physical, technical challenges that we run into. On the other side of the thing is just overall adoption and reliance, or overall adoption and confidence in it, is going to be a challenge at first for a lot of organizations. You have to be able to prove within a certain level of accurate detection rate guarantee that this is actually going to prevent something from happening, because it's one thing to miss a tailgate event that happened at an access control door versus 20 minutes of a guy waving a gun around in the lobby. If you miss that, then your chances of moving forward that customer are pretty slim. I also think that the workflows have to be reassessed. So all of a sudden, you quiet a bunch of the noise, you have these new detection capabilities. Who are you going to alert? How are you going to alert those people? When are you going to alert those people? Are there stages of different escalation pathways that need to be established? And we've seen this like a lot of times, and I think anyone that has sold into a school for something like gun detection, that's a completely different workflow, because now you're dealing with people who are not traditional security people. A lot of schools, they want the principal to get an alert when a detection occurs. Well, now your product has to be friendly for a principal and not for a security operator, right? So we're still working through how all of that needs to be applied for the best and most simple experience for the end user. And then ultimately, I mean, the same challenges that happened when we started getting people to try to adopt the cloud. There's privacy concerns, there's security concerns, There's bandwidth concerns, there's storage concerns. You have to have, one of the reasons that for us at Ambient, one of the reasons that we adhere to a privacy by design framework is because you can't, video surveillance data is very sensitive. There's already a lot of confusion and ambiguity around AI. And when you put sensitive video and AI together, and then you say, oh, and we're going to transmit it to the cloud, people's heads want to explode sometimes, right? So that's the challenge, is getting people to accept that, we are privacy by design foundation. There is transparent explainability built into our product. And then the traditional arguments about privacy and security, data sovereignty, all of those things have to be rolled into the conversation to get that mind shift to occur for many organizations. A lot of organizations have recognized that they need to start, looking really closely at AI products and have an AI evaluation process that ensures that privacy and explainability are built into the system. I think for a long time, we kind of got away with this idea that it's a black box, and that still occurs with generative AI. A lot of people, we don't even really know how it works. We just know that it will spit some information back at us. You can't have that when it comes to security products. It can't be a black box. You have to be able to explain exactly what it's doing, where the data flows are, what safe measures are in place to ensure that you're not introducing bias, that you're being very careful with privacy and with security. Yeah, so that's been the physical challenge: camera placement, adoption of the technology, how to think about the technology, because it's not going to just solve everything and you can't just turn it on for every camera out there. And then on the operational side, or on the commercial side, it's the adoption mindset and understanding how it's going to impact workflows.
Yeah. There was this might be a little nitty gritty question, but I'm curious, right? When a camera has low resolution, which doesn't provide maybe the best data for camera vision, is there any aspect of upscaling that happens on site in order for the camera vision in order to make the video more useful, or maybe we're not there yet?
No,
Like,
I
is there
think
an AI that upscales before the computer vision takes over?
Yeah, I would say that maybe upscale isn't quite what we're doing, what we're seeing today. The video processing part of that is really where a lot of that happens, and people are actually surprised that you can get really accurate, really fast detections with less than ideal camera resolution. I mean, like, I've seen it work at 640 and below. Most organizations or most technologies are actually, they're more looking at individual frames anyway, and that gives them the ability to clean up the image a little bit more. I'm not familiar with something that would upscale first, but I'm sure that it is something that organizations are considering or doing. I like to whenever I'm talking to a customer, I like the idea of telling them that they don't have to have super high resolution cameras for our technology to work, because that's normally one of the first things that they're worried about is, I don't want to go and upgrade all my cameras for this AI technology. Like, the juice is not worth the squeeze at that point. So I like the technology that we can come in and we say, that's fine. If your cameras are 720p, it's going to work just fine. Now, there are considerations we have to take into account, right? So we're still dealing with the same kind of challenges that traditional pixel-based blob detection dealt with, which is, we got to have certain amount of pixels to really accurately define the edges of an object and extract them properly. Shutter speed is going to have a huge impact on the clarity of a single frame taken from a video image. Resolution will determine the amount of pixels that are available within the space. So there's all those kind of traditional challenges, or traditional considerations still exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for answering that. That was a curveball. This is just Don being curious.
Well, it's made me curious, so I'm going to go and look now and see. Maybe
Yeah.
there's some stuff that we're doing that I don't even know about, which is very likely.
Yeah. And yeah. So on the privacy thing, so this actually gets us to a follow-up question, right? Around privacy impact, I am curious, like, when do companies have to do anything different to adopt this, right? Do they have to tell their employees that they're now using camera vision and here's what they're detecting, so it's also explainable to them? Or do they just kind of be like, we own the space, therefore it gives us rights to do whatever we want? Like, how does that go down typically?
I think it's unique to the organization or unique to where you're at. So in the UK, in Germany, GDPR has a different set of requirements and standards than what we can do in the US. If your product is practicing a true privacy by design foundation, which means that They're not going to do any kind of facial recognition. They're not going to collect any biometric data. Even something like the cardholder name on an access control card being associated to the image of the person walking through the door it's a non-starter for privacy by design. So if your organization if your vendor, your manufacturer is adhering to that, then no, there's not any concerns. I mean, people are always going to have concerns about who's recording me and where's it going, where's it being stored, who's looking at it. This goes back to the conversation we had in our first episode that you allowed me to jump into. Yeah. It goes back to like, well, do you want a human looking at you and judging you, or do you want an AI to just review the video and see you as a pixel and maybe a stick figure for pose estimation or something like that? I personally have not had really, and I've worked with some of the largest organizations in the country and in the world. And there is always a little, there's a questionnaire, there's InfoSec and privacy questionnaires you go through and process. But I've never had an organization tell me they're not going to be able to use our product out of privacy concerns, because our product meets the privacy by design foundation, which is very deeply built into GDPR and into the AI Security Act, into the California Privacy Protection Act. So once you establish that and you can prove it, then it's pretty much no longer even a part of the conversation. I think we have more conversations about where the data is stored, right? Because we're a hybrid cloud product. And so at some point, video is going to leave the customer's site, and it's going to either traverse through our cloud, or it's going to potentially be stored in our cloud for archiving or evidence and things like that. That tends to be more of where the conversation occurs. And that just goes back to the traditional, conversations around security and encryption and data at rest and data in transit and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Sound like you used to work for a cloud company.
Yeah, I certainly did. But this is interesting though. So what do you think, and what are you as an AI agency, what are you preparing for, or what kind of measures are you putting in place to address privacy?
Yeah, so right now we use primarily a Microsoft tech stack that's a low code tech stack. So, we leverage what is built within their SaaS. It's all cloud. And so the security is always by design. Also, the customer's data is grounded as they use it. Basically, the AI is learning in the Microsoft graph, which is their company data. It also can be grounded by request on web search data, and at no point is it learning off of necessarily web search, and neither is the AI models learning off of their grounded Microsoft Graph data. So that's one of the big reasons why we push that, right? I think otherwise, it's a good question. When we don't use Microsoft products, a lot of that security is going to be on the customer, because they can actually host it. They can host it in this other low-code tool that we use. But if they really want to scale with agents, then they need to host it in their own cloud. But again, a lot of these clouds already come with out-of-box GDPR, all these things that they give you. Yeah, you pay more for the subscription, but a small business isn't going to go out and pay for InfoSoc audits and do all these other things. Usually you need that kind of backing when you have to reduce your liability for customers you're selling it to, as opposed to yourself, right? Because it's your data. You're controlling your PII or your employees' PII or your company data. In the case of manufacturers in our industry, they're doing that for other customers. So there's a lot more risk, right, at scale.
Yep.
So, which is okay, right? So I wouldn't say we're like a cybersecurity specialist organization. I mean, the first go is we say Microsoft is the tech stack, Microsoft securing it just like your 365 apps. Pretty easy discussion with that. But a lot of it comes down to the controls that are put in place, right? So when I have access to the knowledge graph of Microsoft, if there's not controls already in place about what's confidential data, what is, the non-confidential, whatever, then the person could go request information in the knowledge graph and say, what was our cost of goods sold by line item? And if that is like a regular employee, like a first line manager, and that's supposed to only be protected by the C-suite, but the C-suite or the CTO or the technology leadership didn't put in identity access management or access controls, right? Virtual access controls within the database, then the AI is not going to know any better. The AI is not going to make that assumption, right? We're not there yet. I think that's a bigger problem to solve. So really it's the same thing. It's like the hygiene has to be there, but what I'm saying, by out of box, the security's there, but how the data is managed, who can view it, is still a security question. And that's really up to the business to have done already to get AI ready. This is how Microsoft describes it as foundational work. And then there's modernization. So get your data right, get it clean, get it secured, pocket in the right areas. Now get modernized. If you haven't gone to cloud, you probably should, because AI is going to scale in cloud. It's way more useful in
Yeah.
cloud. All this other stuff we know about already. Um, but yeah, then outside of that, when we do non-Microsoft solutions, the customer just hosts it, in a service that has a lot of the security stuff requirements built in, etc. But when we build the agents, as you know, and as I know, as our audience learned earlier, is that the agents are task oriented. So they only today are accessing an API call, a webhook to something specific, and it has a specific instruction. So when we give it those knowledge bases, the ability to take action, we want to do so in a way that limits what it can read, what it can get, right? Get, pull, push type of situation in API development. So that way it doesn't have access to the whole database. Now, the smaller the business, the less of a concern that is. If I'm an owner and operator and I got like 10 or 15 employees as a security integrator, who cares? I'm just trying to I'm just trying to move fast. I'm just trying to provide better service to my customers, meaning a regular level employee might need to know what our costs are in some cases. So it really just comes down to the appetite of the business. But we believe that with the right controls in place, where they have right organization of data, which is the first step, then security won't be a problem either way.
I think it's a good also to maintain, like you said, the burden. Some of the burden has to be on the end user, on the customer, because
100%.
if we all start getting too comfortable with AI, and it doesn't take very much for it to go slightly sideways, if everyone is sitting around assuming that the AI is doing it 100% the way it's supposed to be, then all it takes is one thing to fall through the cracks, and now all of a sudden everybody's turning AI off, right? So we do have to maintain a little bit of uh, burden on the end user and expect that, yes, our product is going to maintain privacy and security, but how you apply our product is really where the burden of maintaining, especially privacy, comes into play.
Yeah, and in Highland Tech, we serve small businesses, right? That is typically anything less than $100 million, and the security industry is chock full of those companies,
Yeah.
right? And you would not be shocked, but for some listeners, might be shocked to know that their data is just stuck in like a Google Drive in folders. Like, this is to the extent that they manage their data, and that's okay, right? But what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, if they didn't care then, why should they care now, right? So I don't expect that they're going to change unless they want to pay for it. Now, enterprise or bigger companies that have hundreds and hundreds of employees that do value that, they would have already done that. They already had a data strategy and a security strategy. If they have anyone on the cyber side on their team and the HR side around policy and information restriction, usually there's a data steward or data owner that would help them get organized, that they would have already done that. So I think what we find though is that for the companies that want to restrict data to AI, they've already put in the organization of access management around data. But for the companies that don't really care, their data was already like in kind of a very novice organization, and they see AI as a way to really elevate them to the next level, or agents, right?
Yeah.
So I'll say
Automation.
that, yeah, and I'll say this last thing, and then on that, and then I want to go into the last question for you to wrap us up. Okay. So last thing on that is that we do have on Highland Tech, our staff, a data engineer. So his background, he's an SVP at Bank of America around data analytics, big data, and management of data. He's also on the board of Tableau. So, which, if you don't know what that is for the audience, is basically a data engine, big data engine owned by Salesforce that helps companies understand business intelligence and things like this. But to understand business intelligence, need to know how to work with data, SQL databases, and et cetera. And the list goes on.
Yeah.
And so I think for companies that are like concerned about it, and they're like, hey, yeah, our stuff is mismanaged and we just never did anything about it, that's usually like someone they should probably hire full time, because that's always an issue. but we can do it also. So we could come in and create and help them organize the data. So it's good for the AI, but more importantly, it's good for the business. And so we're ready to help them wherever they're at in their journey. It just depends. But anyways, so let's get into wrapping this up. So looking ahead, Jody. So what might be the widespread adoption of VisionOps reshaping the landscape of the physical security industry and surveillance? So how do you feel the widespread adoption is going to go with this?
Well, I think that we're already seeing we're seeing leadership at organizations go to their team and say, bring me AI products. I want to know how AI can make businesses more efficient, more impactful, better data driven decision making happening. And so the leadership teams have recognized, much like what happened with the cloud, when a while back everybody said, you know what, we're a cloud first company moving forward. Don't bring me another proposal for servers. We're going to the cloud. That same thing's happening with AI. And I think that as far as in security, it's really happening because there is a definite shift in mindset of, from a risk management perspective, we need to proactively manage risk rather than react to it and try to cover our asses, excuse my language, cover our tails when something happens. Let's get more proactive instead of reactive. And I think that now there's also a much higher standard for employee safety, employee health. You know, COVID kind of made people reassess how they take care of their employees, and understanding that we have to protect our perimeter, we have to protect our facilities, but we also have to protect our people. And that could oftentimes mean things beyond security, which is where, in my opinion, this is where, directly related to physical security, we're going to see this year and into the following year. This is where we're going to see the most expansion is going to be in employee health and safety using computer vision, because computer vision is now getting to a point where I can alert you if somebody's not using the correct posture to bend over and pick up a package, or if somebody's stacking objects in front of an emergency escape door, or if there's somebody that's obviously drinking and on a forklift, like things like that. That's going to be the next expansion. And you're going to see more and more camera adoption for employee health and safety type functionality. And then ultimately, I think that there's going to be a real drive to produce better security, better risk management, but lower the cost. And the way to do that is to actually create some sort of value driver that the security company can go to leadership and say, look, not only did we save money reducing cost, but now with this new technology that we have brought into your organization, you can now start doing things like improving logistics, right? Mm-hmm. Which is going to increase your value, increase your margins. And I think that's going to be a real significant driver to full wide scale adoption. And then ultimately, the technology is getting better and better. The hardware stack is going to get smaller and smaller, and our ability to contextualize behaviors so customized and so unique to organizations it's almost going to be like, why do I need that old telescopic camera or telephoto camera with the big giant lens and all that stuff when I can take 25 megapixel cameras with my cell phone, right? So that's sort of where we're going to be. Is why am I buying a old traditional VMS or an old traditional access control system when I can buy this vision platform that is now turned into my operational platform, and it can do access control, it can do video, it can fix the AC in the top floor, it can open the door, lock the door. It understands if sudden impact of flow, if people are moving towards an area, it needs to open up doors or increase lights, and there's all this kind of stuff. I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but yeah, I believe that those are the three main things. We're going to see a shift. We're already seeing it, shift in perspective. Let's move to a more proactive rather than reactive. We're going to see higher standards when it comes to employee health and safety. And then we're going to see organizations that are starting to look at how can they utilize their traditional cost or expenses on security to provide actual revenue lines through the technology.
I love it. I love it. Well, you heard it here. I don't know any other conversation in the industry right now that just went that deep on VisionOps, right?
That's right.
So we crushed it. So if you don't know about VisionOps now, if you didn't know it before, you know it now. So Jody, thanks, man. I appreciate the conversation. Always insightful, man. A fellow AI enthusiast and friend. Yeah. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you for the invite and for the time. One shameless plug: if you're going to be coming to ISC West here in a couple weeks, and you are interested in VisionOps, come over to booth 22109. Come see us at Ambient AI. I will also be hosting a session in the bridge, a 30-minute presentation covering AI hype versus high impact. If this topic is something that interests you or that you feel like is going to have impact in your business, come to my session, come to the booth. You won't regret it. And thank you, Don, for allowing me that shameless plug.
You're good, man. You heard it there. You heard it there first, right? I
All right.
think I can like press the screen. Oh, maybe not. Anyways, thanks, Jody.
Cheers, brother.